So, hello everyone. Today we will be in another session of the Wood Life Symposium, and we will discuss about the. Hello everyone. Today we will be in another session of the Wood Life Symposium, and we will discuss about the. Everyone, psychological barrier in another session. I hear my voice overlapping, but I don't know why.
If you have Hopin open on your device, could you please turn it off?
Yes. So I turned off the Hopin platform sound, but we are hopefully today in an hour, we will discuss about the psychological barrier on managing our forests. And today we will be 4 people, make some presentations, and then we will continue with the Q&A session. After the panel, please join the Q&A session, or you can still write down your questions in the chat part. And here today, we will be with Viveka Beckeman, who is the Director General of Swedish Forest Industry Federation. And we will listen from Emma Berglund. I'm very sorry if I make the pronunciation bad. And she is the Forest Director at the Swedish Forest Industries Federation. And we will hear from Roderick Wiles about his Dubai-based regional director for the American Hardwood Export Council. So I will give about their background while they make their presentation. And let me also introduce myself. My name is Nuri, and I'm working for UNDP in Turkey, and I'm managing climate change and environment portfolio, dealing with climate crisis, but also management of the forest and other issues. And I think today we would like to first make our presentations, but also would like to hear from the audiences about their experiences and questions. So please be interactive and ask any questions you have. And to keep the time more effectively, first I would like to start with Emma's presentation. As I said, Emma is the Forest Director in charge of EU and International Affairs at the Swedish Forest Industries Federation. And she has previously headed the umbrella organization for Europe's private forest owners in Brussels and worked for the Federation of Swedish Family Forest Owners. And Emma is a forester by education, and her passion for forests and how they can help us build a better, greener, and more sustainable future is a red thread in her life and career. So Emma, you can share your screen and start your presentation, please.
Thank you so much. I will try to share my screen. Let's see. So, is it working now?
We see the presentation, but needs to make it full screen.
Oh, yes, sorry. How about now?
Still not full screen in my screen.
Sorry,
yes.
Despite the rehearsals, now it should be okay.
That's great.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm so happy to be in this event to talk a bit about forests. So, as Nuri explained, I'm with the Swedish Forest Industry Federation, and I will not say so much more about that because Viveka will come in later on and tell you a bit more about who we are. So I thought I would instead start in the forest and take you on a journey of 100 years of Swedish forestry. We see here a beautiful forest landscape in front of us. And Sweden, indeed, as you all know, is a forest country with 70% of our land is covered with forests. But this beautiful forest of today has not always been the situation. Historically, industrialization had a very dramatic impact on Swedish forests. So in the mid-1800s, timber became a trade commodity, and industrialization demanded a lot of wood. And our forests were actually in very poor condition. We were experiencing deforestation and forest degradation. Also at this time, Sweden was a very poor country, one of the poorest in Europe, and a fourth of our population emigrated to America. But all of this induced a political reaction because the people at the time, they anyway realized that we need to stop and reverse this trend. So in the beginning of the 1900s, 1903, we got the first Forest Act. So this was one of the first in the world. And the focus of this was that we need to ensure that we reforest after we harvest. So we need to ensure that we get new trees when we harvest trees. And this was the beginning of a restoration, the restoration of the Swedish forest landscape. And it has continued ever since. So the negative development was turned around. And since we started measuring in the 1920s up until today, we have actually doubled the amount of forests, the volume of forests that we have. So from these degraded, poor forests, we have now a very rich forest. And at the same time that we have doubled the volume in the actual forest, we have also taken out 4 times that volume. So in Sweden, we usually talk about eating the cookie and still keeping it. So you could say that we have turned 1 cookie into 2 cookies, and at the same time we ate 4. So I think that's a pretty impressive development. And of course also positive for everything that depends on a forest ecosystem, be it the flora and the fauna, but also rural development, economy, and the Swedish welfare. So the forest was a part of building the Swedish welfare state. And also to say that we have learned new lessons along this journey. So in the beginning, the focus was on the production of forest and replanting. And also we had the time in the 50s, mechanization made things very efficient. And it gave us a growing forest industry, but it also gave us bigger machines and very large clear cuts. And there was not an awareness of the environmental consideration needed. So this led to protests, as you can see in the picture, in the 70s and 80s against these large clear cuts. And new insights about the environmental needs and the biodiversity that needs to be considered also. So we saw a paradigm shift in the Swedish forest legislation and system in the beginning of the 1990s, where we had a new Forest Act which put production and environmental goals at equal par. Also at this time, forest certification became very important as for the development of the forest management. So today, we manage our forests for a sustainable development. And for us, it means that we look at the 3 dimensions of sustainability, the ecological, the economic, and the social, to contribute to all of these in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and to see this as an integrated system where we need to find the right balance to be able to achieve as much as we can in all the dimensions and contribute to as many societal goals as possible. And the responsible management of our forests is crucial. It's crucial for biodiversity, also for social values, of course, for jobs and growth, and also not the least for the climate, which Viveka will talk more about later on. So we have set the goals for our industry is that we will manage the forest so that all naturally occurring species can survive in the forest landscape. So this is what I talked about before, the environmental consideration, which is in today's forest management and a fundamental goal in the everyday management to create the best possible situation and possibilities for species to survive in the managed forest. We also see that we manage the forest so it can contribute to increased economic welfare. Also, many of these jobs are in rural areas, as the forest is widely spread in the whole country. And that the forest contributes to the transition to a fossil-free society where we can replace fossil-based products with renewable ones, which again, Viveka will come back to. And meet the increased demand for forest-based products and contribute to the well-being of people, where wooden buildings, of course, is one great example of that. So looking at a Swedish landscape, I wanted to show this picture just so as I think we all like to be out in the forest sometimes and meet there instead of meeting here at Zoom, even if this is also nice. But this can give you an impression of what Swedish forestry looks like. Here we can see forests in different ages. You can see harvested area, and next to the harvested area, you could see forest which may be 100 years old. And we can maybe see a nature reserve where we have old growth forests. And this is a part of the strategy on how we manage the forest for multiple benefits and for protecting the biodiversity and the species, where we use a combination of measures on different scales, ranging from the formal protection in reserves and national parks, and then the more smaller scale protection of biotopes and nature conservation measures in the day-to-day forest management. So to sum up, 70% of Sweden is covered with forests. And as I've told you, we have doubled the amount of forests in the last 100 years, while also using the forests to build welfare and a growing forest industry. And at the same time, we can also see that the committed work that we have done in the last 30 years has given positive results for the environmental aspects of the forest. So looking forward, we see that technical development and digitalization is more important than ever. And this is something that Sweden has also put a lot of effort and money into. As we are a forested country, we need to be at the forefront in these aspects as well. So this makes sure that we can continue to evolve and develop with new challenges. As we all know, the climate change is one of the biggest issues that we have to deal with as a society, but it is a rather new issue, and this we have to evolve with as well. So how we can do better for the climate and for the society. And not the least to harness the potential that forests have in mitigating climate change with growing forests and the use of forest-based products. So that's what Viveka will come back to a bit more. And to leave you with one last image of Swedish forestry. This is a picture from a huge amount of timber that was felled in a very severe storm event about 10 years ago. But what I want to say is that this amount of timber is how much the Swedish forest grows in 24 hours. So the forest is growing, that's for sure, and that's a good thing. Thank you.
Great, Emma. Thank you very much. And the cookies part is also very interesting. While we eating 4 and also making 1 cookie to 2 cookies. And it's really great to hear about how ecology and economy and society can really benefit with the sustainable forest management. And now I would like to give floor to Viveka. And as said, she's the Director General of the Swedish Forest Industry Federation. And actually, Viveka is a lawyer with previous experience heading the legal department of at Sveaskog, Sweden's state-owned forest company and largest forest owner. And the interest in forests and climate has always been a great part of Viveka, and her commitment is based on using bioeconomy to contribute to the transition to a fossil-free society while maintaining welfare. I mean, these are really great words, and I'm very impressed with the using bioeconomy part. And here the floor is with you, Viveka.
Thank you very much. I'll start by trying to share my screen. I'm not a technical whiz, unfortunately, but I'll see what I can do. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, great.
Good start at least. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this exciting event. Like Emma said, Sweden used to be a very, very poor country. Today, we are one of the more wealthier countries in the world, and this is partly due to the development of the forest industry in Sweden. And that's what I'm going to talk about. But before I start, I'd just like to say a few words about us and who we represent. Like the name indicates, the Swedish Forest Industries Federation, we represent the Swedish forest industries. This is, like Emma said, one of our oldest industries, and it's also one of our more important ones. We have about 50 companies as members who are pulp and paper mills, 120 companies working with sawmills, and then about 40 countries were closely related to the forest industry. We are the world's 5th largest exporter of pulp, paper, and sawn timber. And we have an export value of about 14.5 billion euros. And about 60 to 65% of the projects are sold to the European market, and approximately another 20% outside of Europe. So that leaves very little for domestic consumption, which is largely due to the fact that Sweden is a forest. It's covered by forest, and we have not so many people. There are only 10 million of us. Our companies believe in the future of our industry, and just in recent years, they have made investment in the amount of 8 billion euros. On this slide it says 5.7, but I forgot to update it. It's actually 8 billion. We produce an enormous amount of volume, 12 million tons of pulp, and 9.3 million tons of paper, and about 8.5 million cubic meters of sawn timber. So that is definitely a lot. And 96% of all our heating energy is derives from forest-based products. So we have created a lot of wealth in Sweden due to the fact that we have a prosperous forest industry. I don't think anyone has missed the fact that we are at the brink of, or actually in, a climate crisis with global warming and an increased population. This is obviously an enormous challenge for all of us. How will we try to mitigate global warming, given the fact that we are more and more people on Earth, and that all these people luckily are increasing their wealth? So the middle class is growing. That is good in all aspects, except for the fact that the middle class is not good for global warming because we consume more. So how do we mitigate this? How will we be able to ensure that we have a planet to leave to our children and grandchildren, while still maintaining the wealth and the lifestyle that we have gotten used to, and that I hope that we will be able to preserve? It's easy to be pessimistic, and when you hear all the young people demonstrating outside the COP26, I definitely understand their concern, because this is an enormous challenge, but I'm quite convinced that we will be able to find solutions. And I think the most important tool for us to use is to transition to a fossil-free society by using, for instance, forest-based products. So I think we will be able to mitigate the climate crisis if we use our forests wisely. Like Emma said, 70% of Sweden is covered by forest land, and 80% of that is managed forest. And even so, only 1% of the forest is actually harvested annually. This I has already talked about. We think that we really have a good thing going for us. We have the growing forest, which bind carbon dioxide while growing, which can then be stored in products. And these products replace other fossil products to a large extent. Some of them are not replacing fossil products, such as toilet paper, for instance. But if we were to stop harvesting, we would have to find other solutions to meet all those needs. So I think we have a good thing going. I think I skipped this picture. In the debate today, or at least on an EU level, there's often talk about, yes, we should use our forests, but only to a limited extent, and we should only use it for so-called long-lived products. I think that an example of long-lived products is obviously building materials, whereas other products, for instance, toilet papers, sanitary products, packages, are looked down upon. I think this is a pity, and also it's not, at least not in Sweden, possible, because in Sweden we use the entire tree for all of it. We are not in a situation where we use certain trees for building materials and other trees to, for instance, make toilet paper or biofuels. It's all one thing. So the bulk, the fillet, is used for building or for timber, and the rest of the products are used. For instance, the ships are used for pulpwood. Sawdust is used for bioenergy. The bark is also used for bioenergy, and the trunk can be used both as sawn timber and as pulpwood. So I think we have a very good system where we use the entire tree, so we are able to produce both long-lived and short-lived products, which is the most beneficial for the climate. If we look at what we produce today, like I said, about half the tree is timber used as building materials, but we also have packages and paper or other graphic paper, newspapers and other graphic papers. That's the bulk of what we produce today. But the potential for wooden-based products is unlimited almost. Like I said, I think everybody is in agreement that the absolutely best thing you could do for the climate is to build in wood. We have been building in wood for quite some time in Sweden, but until recently, that was mostly one-family houses, or at least rather small houses. But due to developments and new techniques, we are now able to build in much larger houses. For instance, we have in Stockholm, we have a 20-story high building, actually 2 of them, as you can see on this picture, built entirely from wood. There's a concrete base, but the rest is made of wood. So this is really something that benefits the climate. But having said that, that's not all. Those same logs that we use to build these fantastic houses. Also, if we were to take an 8-story apartment building, that would require 2,000 cubic meters of sawn timber. That's quite a lot. Out of that, 6,000 cubic meters, which includes pulpwood, is rejected. By rejected, I mean it's not used for the building, but that is still taken care of. So once we have built this 8-story apartment building from wood, the same trees used for that building will give us 2,300 kilometers of driving with biofuels, 25 years of paper consumption, 30 years of textile consumption, 9 years of district heating, and 6 years of household electricity consumption. So that's quite cool, and you can see that one tree can become so many things. Like I said, the sky is the limit when it comes to what you can make from trees. In 2016, when we had the Nobel banquet, our crown princess wore this lovely gown, which was made from tree-based materials. You can also make biofuels, for instance, like tall oil diesel, which you can use to fill your tanks. I'm quite convinced that the future will be electric cars, but we are not quite there yet. And if we are going to meet the 2030 targets, we would need to still use our, the combustion engines that we have in cars today, but we can do that and still not still do things that are good for the climate, or at least better, by using biofuels. So the tall oil, which is a derivative from the pulp production, can be used to fuel our cars. As I said previously, we are already today doing making packages from trees, but there's still elements which are fossil based, such as the cork or the inner barrier that is used to keep the liquid inside. New techniques will already today on a small scale, but very soon on a larger scale, allow us to make that directly from trees as well. You can even make batteries from the forest. I think that's incredibly cool. And that was my last slide. So basically, my main message here is that we are at the brink of a climate crisis, or we are facing a climate crisis, and we need to act fast, and we need to do whatever we can to save the planet for our children and grandchildren. And if we are going to be able to do that in this short space of time that we have at our disposal, we need to use the forest. We need to use it for building materials, but also to meet other needs, because I definitely want to build a world for my children where we first of all, where there is a planet to leave to them, but also to allow them to share the wealth and the welfare that we have so strenuously built up during the last century in many parts of the world. And I would also like those parts of the world who are not already there to be able to share the same wealth. And if we are going to be able to do that, we need to find we need to find solutions, say, that encompass both transition to a fossil-free products, but also that we still are allowed to consume in order to share, be able to maintain the wealth and the welfare that we have built up. So that's all I had for me. Thank you.
Viveka, thanks a lot. And I see you leave none part of tree out of use.
No.
There is no way.
No.
Yeah, it's kind of a circular economy, what we can see, and it's really amazing how it is promising, even the batteries. Wow. Thanks a lot for this, and I hope we will continue with the Q&A session, but now I would like to give floor to Rod. So let me just give a little information about Rod, who is the Dubai-based regional director for the American Hardwood Export Council. So in short, AHEC. I will refer as the council from now. So this council is the leading international trade association for the American hardwood industry, and it represents the committed exporters among hardwood companies now market and sell their products in significant volumes all around the world. For more than 30 years, the Council has been at the forefront of international wood promotion, successfully building a distinctive and creative brand for American hardwoods. By recognizing the key role design plays in the successful and innovative use of hardwoods, the Council helps the American hardwood industry develop new opportunities by building a rapport with the global design community. So, Rod, these are very interesting words. So the floor is yours with your presentation.
Thank you, Nuri. Let's try and get this going without any issues. Can you see that? Is that correct?
Yes, clear.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction and also for the opportunity to be a part of this panel discussion today. I've heard two very interesting presentations so far. I'm a little bit out of the norm here because we're talking about hardwoods, not softwoods, which is what is mainly coming out of Swedish forests. And also I'm giving the American perspective, so a different perspective altogether. So just very quickly, what we are, what we are not. It's the American Hardwood Export Council. It's a non-profit trade association. We have no commercial role, but the American hardwood industry is made up of thousands of small family-owned businesses. And so if you like, we do the marketing in export markets for them, which is not something that they have the ability to do themselves. So similar to Emma's presentation, I start with what the situation used to be like. This is the end of the 19th century, towards the end of the 19th century. And if you imagine the first European settlers moved over to what became the United States, and they were faced with fabulous, enormous, diverse forest, hardwoods and softwoods, and they needed that wood to do everything. They needed to clear forests for farmland, they needed to build houses, they needed fuel, they needed to build transport. So they did a pretty good job of cutting down a lot of that forest. But towards the end of the 19th century, they moved further west into what has become known as the Midwest, where the farmland was slightly better. And actually a lot of those forests on the eastern seaboard, the hardwood forests, were abandoned. And so by around 1900, there was a restoration, if you like, of the eastern hardwood forests in the United States. And today, those areas, those very same areas, look a bit more like this. And in fact, you can take an example of Pennsylvania, which is one of the major hardwood producing states. In around 1900, it had very little forest cover left, almost zero. By 1970, it was around 70% forest cover again. And you can walk around these forests today and you'll find the remnants of farms, stone walls, buildings deep down in these mature mixed hardwood and softwood forests. So when we're talking about hardwoods in America, we're looking at the eastern seaboard. And what's really important here is who owns the forest. And all of the light green is family-owned forest, and that is all hardwood forest. Around 75% of the hardwood forest is in the hands of about 9.5 million individuals. And they have very, very small plots of land, very small forest land. Very little amounts of the forest belong to the government, federal government or state governments, and also to corporations. So it's really in the hands of families. And in fact, more than 90% of the harvest every year out of hardwoods comes from those private family-owned forests. And that's a really important thing to understand when we're talking about sustainable management. And here's an interesting survey that's carried out on a regular basis, the National Woodland Owner Survey. And these are the reasons for owning forest land by order of importance. And out of 13 reasons, number 11 is to produce timber. So people don't keep forests on their land necessarily to produce wood. They keep forests for many, many other reasons, which are extremely diverse. This is another important note. Here's an example. This photograph is old, 2010, but nonetheless, this is a stand of tulip wood. It's privately owned. It was cut twice since the late 1970s and is now ready for a cut in 2010. And you might wonder, how is it possible? Do these trees go really that fast? And the answer is no, they don't grow that quickly. It's just that we don't cut them all down at once. We don't do clear cutting in hardwood forests in America. It's all selection felling. So individual trees are selected, removed with a minimal disturbance to the remaining trees. And then all of the young trees or the forest floor, as soon as they get some sunlight on them, they race to the top of the canopy as well. So this is selection harvesting or selective harvesting. And what this means is that these forests, which are extremely diverse and expanding in size, are also naturally regenerating. So we're not planting trees either. They're naturally regenerating. And in fact, for every one tree that is removed from the forest, more than two will grow back in its place. And here are some numbers. So the forest area is also increasing, and these dates are a little bit old. It's just that I haven't updated the information, but the picture is the same. So the area of forest is increasing, and that's at a time where actually we are increasing the use of it. The combined, the hardwood forest area in America is the combined land area of France, Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany, about 1.5 times the total size of Turkey. And an interesting statistic, we hear a lot about statistics about a football field in the Amazon or whatever it is disappearing every day. Well, we can say that in America, a football field size of forest is growing every 2 minutes. It's an extremely diverse forest. The darker the green, the more diverse. Again, we're only looking at the eastern side of America here, which is where the hardwoods are. So it's a mixed forest, hardwoods and softwoods, many different species, all at different ages, all mixed together. So full of biodiversity, full of wildlife as well. And in fact, on our website, americanhardwood.org, we have this interactive map, which is well worth looking at. And on the left, you can look at forest volume, you can look at harvest, and you can look at growth, all the way down to county level or state level if you want. And in every state, in every county, and across almost every species, the growth rate is always higher than the harvest rate. So it's worth having a look at that. So how do we demonstrate the sustainability of American hardwoods? Well, there are 4 things that we use. And the first of those is a forestry risk assessment, a long document, the Seneca Creek study that was originally done in 2008 and then updated in 2017 to 2019. This is looking at the risk of illegal wood entering the wood chain in America. And the conclusion of this report, or both reports, is that less than 1% of wood entering the hardwood chain in America could be deemed to be illegal. So there's no organized illegal forestry, which there is in many parts of the world, unfortunately. We have a Forest Service inventory analysis. So this is ongoing all the time. There are people, hundreds, thousands of people on the ground counting, measuring trees. We use NASA satellite technology to count trees from space. And so all the time, the statistics on the forest size, the species in the forest, the diversity of the forest is being updated all the time. We also look at life cycle assessment. Of course, this is more and more important these days. And actually through the last 12 years, we've done a huge amount of work with a number of different third parties to look at the environmental impact of American hardwoods harvested from the forest, sawn in the mill, kiln dried, and then shipped all the way around the world. And what's very interesting from that is that actually, no matter where American hardwoods are shipped to in the world, they will arrive carbon negative, meaning that there is more carbon stored in that wood than was emitted through all the processes of getting that wood there. Even shipping from America all the way to a port as far away as Sydney, for example. And this is wonderful because it means when you're making something using that wood, piece of furniture, for example, a chair, you are starting with a carbon negative material. And we put that into practice nowadays with many projects that we do. This is a few years old, but it's a collaborative project in Australia and New Zealand with designers, and we challenged them to make something to sit on using American hardwoods, and we did a full life cycle assessment of each of those pieces of furniture. And the final piece of the sustainability puzzle is the AHEP, which is something that we developed with all of this information. So it's an American hardwood environmental profile. It's a rather ugly document, but every consignment of American hardwoods shipped around the world can be provided with this document, which answers all the questions on legality, sustainability, growth versus harvest, and it also looks at full ISO-conformant environmental impact categories. So you're looking at how much of an environmental impact this wood arriving at your port, wherever it is in the world, how much impact this wood has had. So this is a really, really useful document. Now, obviously, when we're talking about softwoods from Sweden, for example, we're looking more at construction, actually building the structure of something. When we're talking about hardwoods, we're looking more at what goes inside a building. So it could be joinery, it could be furniture, it could be flooring. However, that's not always the case. And what's really interesting nowadays is we're talking more and more about how we need to use wood instead of many other materials like concrete and steel. Okay, we're probably not going to start building 20-story apartment blocks out of hardwoods. It just doesn't make sense economically. But hardwoods can be used in more and more innovative ways to actually build things. And here's an example, if I can get the video to play. So this is Maggie's Centre in Oldham near Manchester. It's a cancer care centre. And the entire structure of this building is made from cross-laminated timber of American tulip wood. Normally, cross-laminated timber is made using softwoods. And so the entire structure is tulip wood, and also all of the cladding on the outside of the building is tulip wood, is thermally modified. So the entire building is a hardwood building, which is really quite interesting and probably the first in the world, actually. And then we have another example here. This was for the London Design Festival in 2016. We worked with Alison Brooks, a Canadian architect, and this was to explore cross-laminated timber again using hardwoods instead of softwoods. And obviously using softwoods to make CLT is far more cost effective, but it can be argued that to use hardwoods like tulip wood, which are relatively low cost, it's quite an interesting opportunity to explore, because you need less wood to make the same structural panels. So you would get the same strength out of a 5-ply panel, for example, than you would out of a 7-ply panel, sorry, in spruce or pine, etc. So it's just an interesting thing to explore. And the same here, this is with War Thistleton Architects, who I believe you're going to be hearing from later on today. This was for Milan Design Week in 2019, and this was looking at possible ways to provide low-cost housing solutions using boxes made from, again, cross-laminated timber in American tulip wood. And I think that is the end of my presentation today. So thank you very much indeed.
Rod, thank you very much. I think it is very interesting examples, and there are some questions coming. So I will do my presentation in 5 minutes to provide really enough time for all the questions we will have. And let me share my screen here. Okay, and I do hope it will be full screen. Okay, so, hearing all these issues, it reminds me two issues: how we can use the forest, benefits of the forest, to find future solutions to the challenges we have today. but also because of the climate, how we can make the risk-free or risk-avoided development with the circular economy models. And I would like to share two cases with you for how we can use the models to support the sustainable forest management in Turkey. So this was a study in partnership with UNDP, Turkish General Directorate of Forestry, Yale University, and University of Washington. So the key issue here we would like to highlight is about really integration and inclusiveness. Most probably everybody know these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but how we can make the really resilient economy and society based on the biosphere, based on the limits of the earth. And here how we can listen the interaction between the species, habitats, functions, while measuring the carbon pools, decreasing the fire and pest risks, and also enhancing the livelihoods while participating all the segments of the society without leaving anyone behind. And what would be the legislations and institutions from trade side, from management of the forest, and how we can enhance the synergy while avoiding the trade-offs. That's why we try to understand what is the linkages between the Sustainable Development Goals and forest. We started a study to map it in terms of the SDGs, in terms of the afforestation, reforestation, improved forest management and conservation activities, and put it in a structure. And here we can safely say that 15 SDGs out of 17 directly and indirectly linked with the Turkish forestry sector. And there are 153 indicators that we can work on to enhance the forest and sustainable development goals at national level. And for that, we need an MRV architecture, which is to measure how the success is going or not, how to report it, and how to verify it. And using all the current data, we integrated the sustainable development goals and put it in an architecture to be used by the private sector, by the government, by the people living in or nearby the forest areas. And it was about the really understanding the current status, but how we can see the perspective, how we can see from the feature side. And we identified a new system called Forest Ecosystem Management System, FEMS, and it gives us simulating a complete set of realistic management alternatives with the forest growth models for all stands in a planning unit. And we use Chad Oliver's from Yale University rational iterative decision-making process. And it is based on the stand dynamics, actually. So there are some details. I will not, spend lots of time on this, but it's good that it is an open source and it is a web-based, and it can give you the projection, which is available because of the US Forest Service Forest Vegetation Simulator Growth Model. And the scientific base, actually different structures provide different values. Most of the people who deal with the forestry knows that the different structure, which is the stance and the structure of the stance, can provide different values in a spatial time, in a spatial place, with a spatial management style. And when we put it on the landscape, we can understand how the landscape currently covers the stance structure and what is the proportion on it. And if we run with the growth model, we can come up with a feature management responses, management activities that will provide us multiple benefits at the landscape level. And at the expected feature stance structures, we can understand how we can enhance the synergy and avoid the trade-offs for sustainable development goals. And here I would like to stop with the presentation because I want to give more time with the questions, which we have still 10 minutes. And if it is fine with everyone, I first would like to reflect the questions from the audiences to actually Rod, Emma, and Viveka, because the question is about really how people react harvesting forests in the USA and in Sweden. It is asked by Ayşe Şahit. So who would like to respond this question? This is the first question we have.
I could start, and then Emma could continue and fill in all the gaps if I missed anything. I think the picture in Sweden, well, actually, it's not that easy to paint an overall picture. Most people are very positive towards forestry and the forest industry and what we provide. Most people actually don't have an opinion about harvesting at all. That could be due to the fact that we are a relatively large country when it comes to area, a lot of forest and not so many people. So most people don't actually encounter felling areas, so they don't really have an opinion about it. So I think that it's, but then there are smaller groups or groups of people who are very much against forestry, at least the clear cutting methods. So on an overall level, it's positive, but not everybody loves it. What would you say, Emma?
Yeah, I fully agree. That's the picture that we have, that there is a big support. And of course, forestry has been a part of our history also for a very long time, as I explained, even though now when people are moving into larger cities more and more, maybe this connection to the countryside and the forest in that sense is lost. But the overall picture is that, yeah, people are quite happy with forestry or not maybe so knowledgeable about it. And I could mention also that, as I said, we have 70% of the land is forest, and Sweden is a large country area-wise, and about 1% of our forest is harvested each year. So we have most of the forest is big and growing.
And Rod, how US people react to harvesting?
It's similar, really, because so many people are not actually in touch with nature. They're living in cities; they don't see it. And of course, those who do live outside of the cities in the forest, they understand that it's a part of life is chopping down trees. But of course, it isn't the clear cutting method isn't used in hardwoods either, so it's much less visible than it is when clear cutting. So I don't think there's a hugely strong adverse reaction to it at all. Of course, there are those who think that cutting down trees is bad, and usually those thoughts are unfortunately misplaced, but that's a different story.
Yeah, and I think need to highlight that Ayşe says harvesting of forest in Turkey is unacceptable for the society, and she would like to hear your recommendations for convincing people harvesting forest and using wood in buildings is sustainable and good. Any recommendation on that? Then we will move to another question.
It's hard to give a recommendation, but I would say that you need to see the entire picture. You need to paint the entire picture, both when it comes to the products and the substitution effect of the products from the forest, because that's a substantial climate benefit. But I think we also need to talk about how we balance biodiversity with active forestry and what we have learned during the last century. Because when you hear clear cutting, you think of these enormous areas, but actually the average clear cutting in Sweden today is 5 hectares, which is quite small, or relatively small. It's basically the picture Emma showed you earlier. So I think if I were to give one piece of advice, it would be to paint the entire picture.
Yeah, I would second that. And it's you've got to see the whole thing. That's it. And we're one of the things that is being talked about a lot at the moment with respect to climate change is that we all must go out and plant trees. And of course, companies are using that quite a lot these days, saying, oh, well, you've just ordered this online and we're going to plant so many trees. Well, that's all very well and good, but planting trees is not the solution to climate change. And actually planting trees in the wrong place could be a bad thing. And the other thing that's very important is that if we don't do anything with our forests, if we just conserve them and look at them, and we don't make any use of them, then they become old, they die, there's natural mortality, which isn't good for the environment, for the climate. And also they become undervalued, and then they can be turned into something else, which is extremely dangerous indeed.
And Emma, any more?
Yeah, I think this is a very good point, that trying to explain this, because I think this is kind of a misconception sometimes, that if you have like a forest industry or a demand for wood, this means that forest will be destroyed. So just underlying what Rod said, it's actually the opposite. And that's what we can see also globally. When the forest has a value for people, and when there is a demand for wood, there is also an incentive to invest into the sustainable management of this. Because of course, as a forest owner, you want to keep your forest healthy and resilient. That's a strategic interest as well. And that's what keeps them a positive development.
Great, and maybe I can only add that data-driven decision-making process and making everybody involved and understand how these actions, management and legislations and the trade part is really traceable in terms of the information and data. So inclusiveness is very important. And actually, as you highlighted, if we just leave the forest like that, there is the increasing risk of fire. The fuel management is important, and also the pests. And the second question is actually about that. Here the question comes to your view. It is from Ece Çakır. Dear all, thank you very much for these informative presentations. I would like to ask a question about wildfires. This was a very discussed topic this summer. What is the best way to manage the after effects of wildfires on the forest? Is planting new trees the solution, or is there a more sustainable and efficient management system to deal with it? Over to you guys.
I'll pass, I'm a lawyer.
Emma, I think you're probably better placed to answer this than I am.
I mean, I think it's a difficult question, because of course this will be very context dependent. So this will depend, what you should do will very much depend on what kind of forest and ecosystem and climatic conditions you have. But as mentioned earlier, of course, one part is the preventive work, which is, I think, where we need to focus. That's the most important, to try to avoid that this happens. But yeah, after a forest fire, of course, it's I think essential to get the new forest back. And then, of course, there is the need to think about what, I mean, this is something that's also a part of the Swedish forestry, and I think all the sustainable forest management is that you plant or regenerate with the right type of trees for that climatic conditions, because otherwise they will be more prone to fires or insect attacks, for example. So this is like the site-specific forest management, which is important.
And just would like to make an additional information there. This year we had the mega fires, and it was in the Mediterranean region, and mainly about the maquis and red pine. And according to the biological succession process, rather than forcing the area with the new plantation, leaving the maquis and red pines free for 1 or 2 years, enhance the succession and prepare a better, ecological system. So Ece, maybe we can communicate on that, because we have very good on-the-ground studies that can provide information. And there is another question. We have 1 minute left. But by the way, all attendees, all people, please join the Q&A session after this panel. In 30 we will have 30 minutes to discuss all the issues in detail. But I will, of course, reflect this second question. Okay. So it is from Esin Aydemir. The voice cut out for a split second. Just when talking about the cross-laminated timber, did you say the CLT was produced from tulip wood? How different is that production process comparing to softwood CLTs we are used to seeing? Rod?
Yes, yes, the answer is yes. I said tulip wood, CLT. Tulip wood is a species of hardwood which is almost unique to the United States. It's a very large tree. It's quite a soft timber, but it has an excellent strength to weight ratio. The production technique is extremely similar. It's just that you need, and I'm not an expert in CLT, but you need less layers in the sandwich, if I can say that. So because you'll get a lot more structural strength from tulip wood than you will from an equivalent dimension piece of spruce, for example.
Oh, great. And let's take 2 or 3 more minutes. I think, Rod, it is again about the issue that you deal. In the US, quite a portion of the forest seem to be private owned. I'm not sure about Sweden, but we know that people have a right to roam in the forest, showing a specific approach to the relation between people and forest. How do you think these approaches affect the industry and the use of forest products in these countries? It's again from Esinay'dır.
This is a very good question, but very complex actually. But one of the points I was trying to make was that one of the keys to the sustainability of the American hardwood forest is the fact that it belongs to so many private individuals and it doesn't belong to a government. Because those private individuals understand its value. They understand that if they look after it, if they maintain it, it will continue to have a value for their children and their children's children. And so that becomes a really, really good way of looking after it. It's often known as a legacy crop, actually. But as I also showed, keeping forest in America it's not always for timber production. And this can have a bit of a negative bearing on the forest industry and the production of wood products, because all of those sawmills around America that are relying on logs from private ownership, it's not the sawmill that controls the volume of wood that they're receiving. And so they are also subject to availability, they're subject to market prices. So this has a big effect on availability, on price, on time of delivery, and all these things as well. So it's a very complex issue, but it's a situation a system rather, that works very well. I don't think we can say the same about a country where the entire forest belongs to the government, for example. And we've seen many, many examples in developing countries where the state owns the forest, the state needs to make money, the state sells the forest. And, without naming names, there are countries in Southeast Asia where this has happened time and time again. So, having the forest in the hands of private individuals is complex, it's difficult, but I believe it's the best solution.
Yeah, and in Turkey, 99.9% of the forest owned by government, state-owned forest. Okay, Emma and Viveka, would you like to add something more, or shall we move to the hopping?
Can I say quickly that in Sweden we have a very versatile ownership structure whereby half of the forest is owned by private individuals and the rest is owned either by the state or by companies. And but I think that I could just second what Rod said. Even though we have different ownership structure, there is definitely the forest is definitely viewed as a legacy crop and something that you look after for the future.
Yeah. Emma, would you like to add anything more?
No, it's very well said.
All clear. So I invite everyone to join to the hopping session. And there is a link that we can go and we can continue our discussions and Q&As there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.